Chapter 20. Katherine Makes a Friend.
Please support by subscribing for more classic audiobooks.
On the following morning, Katherine and Lennox were sitting on the terrace of the Villa Marguerite. Something in the nature of a friendship was springing up between them, despite the difference in age. But for Lennox, Katherine would have found life at the Villa Marguerite quite intolerable. The Kettering case was the topic of the moment. Lady Tamplin frankly exploited her guest's connection with the affair for all it was worth. The most persistent rebuffs that Katherine could administer quite failed to pierce Lady Tamplin's self-esteem. Lennox adopted a detached attitude, seemingly amused at her mother's maneuvers, and yet with a sympathetic understanding of Katherine's feelings. The situation was not helped by Chubby, whose naive delight was unquenchable, and who introduced Katherine to all and sundry as,
"This is Miss Gray. You know that blue train business? She was in it up to the ears. Had a long talk with Ruth Kettering a few hours before the murder. Bit of luck for her, eh?"
A few remarks of this kind had provoked Katherine that morning to an unusually tart rejoinder, and when they were alone together, Lennox observed in her slow drawl,
"Not used to exploitation, are you? You have a lot to learn, Katherine."
"I am sorry I lost my temper. I don't, as a rule."
"It is about time you learnt to blow off steam. Chubby is only an ass. There is no harm in him. Mother, of course, is trying, but you can lose your temper with her until Kingdom Come, and it won't make any impression. She will open large, sad blue eyes at you and not care a bit."
Katherine made no reply to this filial observation, and Lennox presently went on,
"I am rather like Chubby. I delight in a good murder, and besides, well, knowing Derek makes a difference."
Katherine nodded.
"So you lunched with him yesterday?"
Pursued Lennox reflectively.
"Do you like him, Katherine?"
Katherine considered for a minute or two.
"I don't know."
She said very slowly,
"He is very attractive."
"Yes, he is attractive."
"What don't you like about him?"
Katherine did not reply to the question, or at any rate not directly.
"He spoke of his wife's death.
She said,
He said he would not pretend that it had been anything but a bit of most marvelous luck for him."
"And that shocked you, I suppose?"
said Lennox. She paused, and then added in rather a queer tone of voice,
"He likes you, Katherine."
"He gave me a very good lunch,"
said Katherine, smiling. Lennox refused to be sidetracked.
"I saw it the night he came here.
She said thoughtfully,
The way he looked at you, and you are not his usual type, just the opposite. Well, I suppose it is like religion. You get it at a certain age."
Mademoiselle, ils sont at the téléphone,
said Marie, appearing at the window of the salon.
Monsieur Hercule Poirot desire to speak with her.
More blood and thunder. Go on, Katherine. Go and dally with your detective.
Monsieur Hercule Poirot's voice came neat and precise in its intonation to Katherine's ear.
"That is Mademoiselle Gray who speaks? Bon. Mademoiselle, I have a word for you from Monsieur Van Alden, the father of Madame Kettering. He wishes very much to speak with you, either at the Villa Marguerite or at his hotel, whichever you prefer."
Katherine reflected for a moment, but she decided that for Van Alden to come to the Villa Marguerite would be both painful and unnecessary. Lady Tamplin would have hailed his advent with far too much delight. She never lost a chance of cultivating millionaires. She told Poirot that she would much rather come to Nice.
"Excellent, Mademoiselle. I will call for you myself in an auto. Shall we say in about 3/4 of an hour?"
Punctually to the moment Poirot appeared. Katherine was waiting for him, and they drove off at once.
"Well, Mademoiselle, how goes it?"
She looked at his twinkling eyes, and was confirmed in her first impression that there was something very attractive about Monsieur Hercule Poirot.
"This is our own Roman policier, is it not?"
said Poirot.
"I made you the promise that we should study it together. And me, I always keep my promises."
"You are too kind,"
murmured Katherine.
"Ah, you mock yourself at me. But do you want to hear the developments of the case, or do you not?"
Catherine admitted that she did, and Poirot proceeded to sketch for her a thumbnail portrait of the Comte de la Roche.
You think he killed her?
Said Catherine thoughtfully.
That is the theory.
Said Poirot guardedly.
Do you yourself believe that?
I did not say so. And you, mademoiselle, what do you think?
Catherine shook her head.
How should I know? I don't know anything about those things, but I should say that.
Yes.
Said Poirot encouragingly.
Well, from what you say, the Count does not sound the kind of man who would actually kill anybody.
Ah, very good.
Cried Poirot.
You agree with me. That is just what I have said.
He looked at her sharply.
But tell me, you have met Mr. Derek Kettering.
I met him at Lady Tamplin's, and I lunched with him yesterday.
A mauvais sujet.
Said Poirot, shaking his head.
But les femmes, they like that, eh?
He twinkled at Catherine and she laughed.
He is the kind of man one would notice anywhere.
Continued Poirot.
Doubtless you observed him on the blue train.
Yes, I noticed him.
In the restaurant car?
No, I didn't notice him at meals at all. I only saw him once, going into his wife's compartment.
Poirot nodded.
A strange business.
He murmured.
I believe you said you were awake, mademoiselle, and looked out of your window at Lyons? You saw no tall dark man such as the Comte de la Roche leave the train.
Catherine shook her head.
I don't think I saw anyone at all.
She said.
There was a youngish lad in a cap and overcoat who got out, but I don't think he was leaving the train, only walking up and down the platform. There was a fat Frenchman with a beard, in pajamas and an overcoat, who wanted a cup of coffee. Otherwise, I think there were only the train attendants.
Poirot nodded his head several times.
It is like this, you see.
He confided.
The Comte de la Roche has an alibi. An alibi, it is a very pestilential thing, and always open to the gravest suspicion. But here we are.
They went straight up to Van Aldine's suite, where they found Knighton. Poirot introduced him to Catherine. After a few commonplaces had been exchanged, Knighton said,
I will tell Mr. Van Alden that Miss Grey is here.
He went through a second door into an adjoining room. There was a low murmur of voices, and then Van Aldine came into the room and advanced towards Catherine with outstretched hand, giving her at the same time a shrewd and penetrating glance.
I'm pleased to meet you, Miss Grey.
He said simply.
I have been wanting very badly to hear what you can tell me about Ruth.
The quiet simplicity of the millionaire's manner appealed to Catherine strongly. She felt herself in the presence of a very genuine grief, the more real for its absence of outward sign. He drew forward a chair.
Sit here, will you, and just tell me all about it.
Poirot and Knighton retired discreetly into the other room, and Catherine and Van Aldine were left alone together. She found no difficulty in her task. Quite simply and naturally she related her conversation with Ruth Kettering, word for word as nearly as she could. He listened in silence, leaning back in his chair, with one hand shading his eyes. When she had finished he said quietly,
Thank you, my dear.
They both sat silent for a minute or two. Catherine felt that words of sympathy would be out of place. When the millionaire spoke, it was in a different tone.
I'm very grateful to you, Miss Grey. I think you did something to ease my poor Ruth's mind in the last hours of her life. Now I want to ask you something. You know, Monsieur Poirot will have told you about the scoundrel that my poor girl had got herself mixed up with. He was the man of whom she spoke to you, the man she was going to meet. In your judgment, do you think she might have changed her mind after her conversation with you? Do you think she meant to go back on her word?
I can't honestly tell you. She had certainly come to some decision, and seemed more cheerful in consequence of it.
She gave you no idea where she intended to meet the skunk, whether in Paris or at Hyers.
Catherine shook her head.
She said nothing as to that.
Oh,
Said Van Aldine thoughtfully.
and that is the important point. Well, time will show.
He got up and opened the door of the adjoining room. Poirot and Knighton came back. Catherine declined the millionaire's invitation to lunch, and Knighton went down with her and saw her into the waiting car. He returned to find Poirot and Van Aldine deep in conversation.
If we only knew,
said the millionaire thoughtfully,
what decision Ruth came to. It might have been any of half a dozen. She might have meant to leave the train at Paris and cable to me. She may have meant to have gone on to the south of France and have an explanation with the Count there. We are in the dark. Absolutely in the dark. But we have the maid's word for it that she was both startled and dismayed at the Count's appearance at the station in Paris. That was clearly not part of the preconceived plan. You agree with me, Knighton?
The secretary started.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Van Alden. I was not listening.
Daydreaming, eh?
Said Van Aldine.
That's not like you. I believe that girl has bowled you over.
Knighton blushed.
She is a remarkably nice girl.
Said Van Aldine thoughtfully.
Very nice. Did you happen to notice her eyes?
Any man
Said Knighton.
would be bound to notice her eyes.
If you enjoy audiobooks like this, consider subscribing for more.